Mike Luisi.
Hey, Steven. Just
Hey, you
checking.
sound good.
Everything okay with the audio?
Yep, you sound good.
All right, great. Thanks.
Sonny Gwynn.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit, but you sound good now.
Okay, yeah, we lost internet last night, so I'm hoping everything's good today. So, sound all right?
Yeah, you sound good right now.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Steven, just doing a mic check.
You sound good, John.
Thank you.
If you'd like to do a mic check, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll help you check your mic. Peter Hughes.
Good morning.
You sound good. Rich Wong.
Morning, everyone.
You sound good, Rich.
Thank you.
Josh Ramon.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Thanks.
Rick Bellavance.
Good morning.
You sound good. James Fletcher.
Failure to communicate.
You sound good.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Mike Louisi, Council's Vice Chair. I think it's probably about time we go ahead and get the meeting started. I have one announcement to make. I got a message from Wes this morning. He had an issue. His mother, it appears that his mother fell last night and he needed to attend to help her out at the hospital. So Wes, I was looking online. I don't think he's on with us right now, but he might join us later. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and step in and take care of getting through our agenda for this morning. So we're going to start out today with our business session. And the first item on our business session is the committee reports. There is an extra committee report that I'd like to add to this. Right now, our agenda only shows the NTAP committee report, but we also, yesterday, we had an executive committee meeting that I'll provide some brief details on before we jump into Chris's executive director's report this morning. So with all of that said, let's go ahead. Let me make sure Hannah's ready to go. Hannah, are you there with us?
Yep, I am.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, Hannah, you go ahead and get started.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. This will just be a quick update for the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel. As many of you know, we recently held an NTAP meeting last month on January 9th in Philadelphia. Like many of our full NTAP meetings, this was a one-day in-person meeting with a virtual component, and all of the meeting materials associated with this meeting are on the council website, and the meeting summary was provided for today's briefing materials in case you want to read the specifics about the meeting. We had a number of items on our agenda, including an update from the center on all of the different surveys, which included a lot of the same information that Dr. Ford presented to the council yesterday, so I won't go into any detail there. During the meeting, we also reviewed a draft storybook, or kind of a draft concept of this research to rule infographic that the center's been working on. Just for a little background, the goal of this infographic is to show on a single page digestible format the process of how we go from our stock assessments to our annual and multi-year catch and landing limits. The discussion really highlighted that nothing we do is really easy or simple, but during the discussion, we got a lot of valuable feedback, and the center is working on incorporating much of that and are hoping to hire a contractor to help with the actual creation of the infographic product. During the meeting, we also received a presentation on fishery independent surveys and assessments. The presentation was more of a refresher for most, really just to help remind the group of some key design elements and details to keep in mind for stock assessments, especially as we continue to have our discussions on the development of the industry-based survey. NTAP also discussed the contingency plan for the Bigelow and the design for the industry-based survey pilot project, much of which Dr. Ford covered during her presentation yesterday. But I did want to note that during this discussion, the NTAP did formally approve the goals of the industry-based survey. At NTAP, we don't normally vote on things, but we did actually have a formal motion at this meeting. As Dr. Ford mentioned yesterday, the NTAP working group is continuing to meet every third Thursday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. This is again to continue our discussions on the development of the industry-based survey. And that group is meeting again tomorrow. So if you're interested in tuning in, that meeting's going to be tomorrow from 9 to 10. We're also starting to plan the logistics and agenda for our summer NTAP meeting. The specific date and location are still to be determined, but we will likely be hosting this meeting somewhere in the New England region, since we try to alter regions meeting to meeting. And with that, that concludes my report. So I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. That was a quick report this morning. Let me see if I have any hands. Please be patient. I've got to scroll through the list of names. Does anyone from the council have any questions for Hannah? Okay, I don't see any hands coming up at this time. Is there anyone from the public that has anything they would want to discuss with Hannah? Any questions? Okay, I don't see any hands at this time, Hannah. So thank you very much. And we'll look forward to your next report. Okay, stepping into the next item. Chris, you and I talked briefly about adding this item to the agenda, which is just a quick update of the executive committee meeting that we had yesterday. You had mentioned a motion that came from the executive committee.
Correct. Yes.
So I wonder if we can get that up on the screen, and then I can provide a quick, or maybe it would be helpful if you did a quick just overview of what was presented in discussion yesterday, and then we can take up the action that came out of the committee.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the executive committee met yesterday in closed session to consider reappointment and consideration of new SSC members. We had a good discussion in terms of the folks who are currently on the SSC, as well as we looked at 6 applications for folks that were interested in being on the SSC. And basically, the executive committee made this motion, which is to reappoint the list of 13 current members and appoint Dr. Holly Kinsvater and Dr. Yang Chen to the Scientific and Statistical Committee for a 3-year term beginning March 1, 2025. That's the motion by the committee. Certainly, that's the very, very quick overview, but if anyone has any questions or needs any additional information, I'd be glad to provide that at this time. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yep, thanks, Chris. Okay, does anyone have any questions, any details they want to discuss? For anyone have any questions for Chris, or any comments regarding the individuals that were selected? Okay, seeing no hands at this time. Is there any objection? And well, let's do this for formality. As vice chair of the executive committee, I'll go ahead and make this motion on behalf of the committee. The motion is moved to reappoint the list of 13 current members and appoint Dr. Holly Kinsvater and Dr. Yang Chen to the Scientific and Statistical Committee for a 3-year term beginning March 1st, 2025. That is a motion on behalf of the committee. It does not need a second. Is there any objection to this committee, or I'm sorry, to this motion? Any objection? All right. I don't see any hands. Therefore, this motion carries by unanimous consent. Okay. I don't believe there was anything else that needed to come up before the council from the executive committee. So with that, I think we'll take the opportunity to jump into the next item on our agenda here today, which is Chris's executive director's report. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Chris, and I think the two of us, if we can work together to call on folks as they raise their hand, I'll keep an eye on the list that's on the screen here, and maybe you can do the same.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. It's all you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council, for approving our SSC membership. We have a good group of folks have served us well, and these new folks are very, very accomplished. So we have an excellent SSC that's going to provide a number of services to the council over the next 3 years. With that, I'd like to jump into the executive director's report. I have several items behind the tab that I'd like to call your attention to, about 11 or 14 items or so. So take a look at that if you can. The first item behind the tab is the 2025 Plan Council meeting topics. So this is the first time that you've seen this document, at least in public, as it relates to what we plan to do for 2025. So if you remember, we had the approval of the 2025 implementation plan in December, and this is basically how that approval looks and how things lay out for the year relative to that particular decision. So you can look at our April meeting. Our April meeting is going to be in Galloway, New Jersey. We have a number of items on that list, including some actions related to recreational measure setting process, the addendum framework that Julia has been working on. We'll be looking at that sector separation data collection amendment, scoping comments that Kylie talked about this week. We'll also be having our first framework meeting on this gear marking on-demand gear framework that Hayden's working on. It's unclear as to exactly what we plan to do with the monkfish specifications. That may change. That may be something that we handle not through a framework, but in fact just through a report that I'll give as the executive director report, or in the executive director report. And there's the Mid-Atlantic State of the Ecosystem report as well. One of the things that we'll be looking at as well, something we talked about this week, which is the 5-year review for the essential fish habitat, through that report, and a couple other updates. The other thing we'll be doing, hopefully in April, is giving awards to some well-deserving folks. So that'll be a pretty full meeting. Right now I'm looking at probably starting Tuesday afternoon, but that could change. So we'll definitely let folks know as time passes relative to that particular meeting. You can take a look at where and what we plan to do for the other meetings for the year, including the meeting in June in Virginia Beach. We have an August meeting in Annapolis, an October meeting in Philly, December meeting in Washington, D.C. So speaking of the 2025 proposed actions and deliverables, this is the final draft of that document. It's the next thing behind the tab, so you can take a look at that. One of the things to remember, I've said this before and I'll say it again, is that this list is highly dependent on our budget. I've had nothing from NOAA to suggest that our budget's going to change for 2025. So we're moving forward with planning and getting all these things done this year. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions before I move on. I don't see any. Moving on. The next item behind the tab is the 2025 stock assessment schedule. Note that we have a number of species that will be basically be taking a look at, will be involved with management track assessments in June. Those include Atlantic mackerel, black sea bass, bluefish, shortfin squid, scup, and summer flounder. Also, management track assessment conducted for monkfish in September. You can see the other species there as well. Next item beyond the tab is something that you see at every meeting. This is a good reference document giving you status of the council actions under development, including some of the things that I just mentioned, including the recreational measure setting framework, the sector separation data collection amendment, habitat amendment, that on-demand gear framework, and the spiny dogfish accountability measures framework that Jason went over yesterday. The next item behind the tab is our timeline and status of actions and amendments, frameworks under review. Just giving you an idea where we're at with those particular actions. You can see that the packages for the summer flounder mesh exemption framework and the surf clam and ocean quag separation requirements amendment have not been completed yet and have not been submitted to NOAA, but they will be soon. Finally, in terms of timelines and status, a couple other documents beyond the tab. This is timeline and status of current and upcoming specifications for our fisheries. And with that, I'll stop, Mr. Chair, and see if there's any questions before I move on.
Okay, any questions for Chris at this point? I don't see any hands, Chris, coming up. So go ahead and continue.
Sounds good. So the next item behind the tab is a memo from Jessica and Tori to me, basically detailing some of the things that we've talked about already this week related to the essential fish habitat review and that omnibus EFH amendment. In this document, she talks about the fact that the council reinitiated an EFH review and EFH amendment through its 2023 implementation plan. So we've been involved with this stuff for a while. You can see some of the additional details in there in terms of what we expect over the next couple months. But basically, we're going to have a meeting of the EOP, and then we'll be taking documents to the council for approval. And all that action is detailed in this memo. So if you have any questions, certainly we can talk about that. The next item behind the tab is Hayden's first memo to me regarding a framework action that she is involved with. She's our Mid-Atlantic Council representative on the working group that's helping the New England Council and GARFA with that particular action. You can see the details there regarding the rationale and timeline for the action. The fact that we do expect final action on this document or this action in 2025 provides background as to why we're involved, how it's going to work. And again, certainly we can talk about any of the specifics if you're interested. One of the other things that we're involved with, and we've talked about at every meeting, is Inflation Reduction Act funding projects. This document behind the tab is a memo to me from Brandon and Kylie, basically detailing where we're at with those particular projects. Again, just like our administrative budget, there's been no word as to what we should expect relative to these funds. We continue to move forward with these projects. You can see in the list that in fact we have 4 in progress. The fifth one, Project 4, Climate Ready Updates to the Essential Fish Habitat Source Documents, is something that we're also done with, in the sense that RFP closed and we signed a contract with the contractor to do that work. That contractor is Gavin Fay, so he is starting work on that particular project. And again, we have the money in the sense that it's in an account. We've been able to draw down funds to pay for contractors' work we needed. And we expect that we'll continue to work on those projects in 2025. There's some additional detail there as it relates to each one of those projects. Again, if there's any questions about that, certainly we can talk about that. One of the other things that we have in our briefing book at every meeting is an update on offshore wind. Julie has prepared that memo for us again for this particular meeting. It's very detailed. There's a lot in there. As you might expect, given some of the things that are happening in DC, there's a lot of question about how and where and what's going to happen with offshore wind. So you can take a look at our involvement as it relates to mostly Julia. So we're still working on a comment letter with the New England Council regarding an environmental impact statement for that Vineyard Mid-Atlantic offshore wind project. There is a couple paragraphs in here regarding the executive action on offshore wind. But again, a number of the projects have continued to move forward. You can see as you go through the document what projects I'm talking about, but there's a number of paragraphs here related to the fisheries mitigation guidance that we received from BOEM. And you can see what that means. And then you can look at the other projects that have been approved. And then if you scroll down, you can see the construction activities are ongoing relative to a number of wind projects. We'll continue to track wind projects. Julie will continue to put together a report for the council to consider. In fact, over the year, we will have a number of the wind developers come in and give presentations to the council relative to where they're at with a number of the wind projects. The next item behind the tab is a document, basically a report of a project that we supported. And you can see the details there, but basically it involves our support of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center Biology Program Aging Program. There's the project accomplishments. Basically, we provided support And you can see how that support was used, and the 5 specific goals that we wanted to achieve through the project all were accomplished in coordination with the Northeast Fishery Science Center. You can see the details there. I'm certainly not going to read them to you. And again, if you have any questions, we can talk about that. The final letter behind the tab is or the final document behind the tab is a letter to John Mahali. And basically it's a response from Garfo, and details are there. Mr. Mahali requested assistance with establishing a new hand gear permit category for a number of our species. And basically we'd let this category not be subject to vessel baseline and upgrade restrictions. In the letter, Mike details how the process would work. In fact, the councils were interested in that particular idea. And again, that's something we can talk about if you're interested. There's 2 other documents that are linked to this tab. One is a memo to the council from Mary detailing some of the plans we have for the 50th anniversary of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So the councils have been around for 50 years in 2026. So that particular anniversary is something that we want to celebrate. There's a couple paragraphs there, several paragraphs there that detail some of the things that we, mostly Mary, have been thinking about relative to her interaction with the CCC Communications Committee. Take a look at that. There's a planned video. There's a number of other projects and products that we're thinking about as well. And certainly, you know, folks have been involved with anniversaries before. If you have any ideas that you think we need to pursue relative to how we do a 50th anniversary, let us know. Let Mary know. And the last item I want to talk about is something new. We haven't seen this before, but this is something that Hayden has put together for the council. Basically, it's a newsletter that you'll see in each one of our briefing books from now on, detailing what's going on with protected resources. And basically, there's a lot going on, which is why we have the newsletter, and which is why Hayden put it together. And if you didn't guess, Hayden is our Mid-Atlantic Council staff PR person. So you can take a look at the various meetings and news related to all things protected resources. There's a couple of things in there that might spark your interest. Certainly, again, if there's anything in there that you want to talk about, we can talk about today. If you hadn't had a chance to read those or want to do a follow-up, certainly reach out to Hayden or give me a call and we can talk about them. And with that, Mr. Chair, that was very quick, but certainly I think I covered everything I needed to cover. If there's any questions or comments, I'd be glad to take them now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. I've got a few hands. I have a comment before we wrap this up on the wind stuff, but let's go ahead to the members of the council that have questions. I'll start with Chris Bat-Savage and then Jim Gilmore, you're on deck. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you for the report, Chris. And yeah, love the Protected Resources newsletter. Look forward to seeing those in the future. I had a question on the memo regarding the gear marking and on-demand gear framework action. It covers fixed gear only, which makes sense. But it's for only, I guess, fisheries with gear marking requirements that would require revision. But I guess there's other fisheries besides the ones listed in the memo, like maybe bluefish, spiny dogfish, and I guess scup for the pot fishery that use fixed gear. Would those fisheries also need to be considered in this action? Just trying to understand where the demarcation is as far as which FMPs will be impacted by this and which aren't. And I'll have a follow-up question after that. Thanks.
Yeah, excellent question, Chris. I think I have the answer, but I'm going to turn to Hayden to see if Hayden, I think you're on. If not, then I'll answer. But Hayden.
Yeah, so why those certain fisheries were included in the memo is that the New England Council's on-demand fishing gear conflict working group had looked into existing gear marking requirements and specifically marked those fisheries as ones that may need to have the requirements revised to allow for on-demand fishing. But in the development of this action, it's my understanding that the FMAP PDT will be looking at all fishery management plans. So of course, there's a possibility that more would be included in the future if there are gear marking requirements outside of what was in the memo that need to be addressed.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm afraid to even ask this question, and I don't see Tony Kearns on the webinar, but you know, some of these fisheries also occur in state waters, and I think most, if not all, states have gear marking requirements for fixed gear. Is it anticipated that at some point there would be complementary action by ASMFC, you know, to offer the most protection for right whales and other protected species, or are we just worried about federal waters now and kind of see how this plays out in the future?
So again, I'll turn to Hayden, but from my understanding, this is a federal action, and I'm not sure how ASMC has been involved to date. But Hayden, maybe you know.
Yeah. So so far this is just concerning federal waters, but there is an ASMFC representative on the FMAP PDT that will be involved in the process.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Hayden. Jim Gilmore, you're up next.
Thank you, Chairman. And Chris, this goes back to the letter on John Mahaly wrote to Mike. And when I first read the letter, it sounded like kind of like some decent amount of work. And so I talked to Mr. Mahaly, and I think a little context would help, and maybe there's other options for addressing his problem. So the numbers we're talking about, he had a boat that was in the 21 to 22 foot range for like 20, 30 years, whatever it was, with that like maybe a 200 horsepower engine. I'm not exactly sure of the numbers. So he actually sold that boat. He now has he wants to get a 25 foot boat. Based upon the rules, the biggest engine he can get is 250 horse. I went to the New York Boat Show last week. I don't think you can buy a boat that big with that small an engine on. I think 300. So it's kind of a really small issue, but so yeah, I guess we can go through a process of making exemptions, but are there other options for addressing the problem? Because it's a relatively minor change, and it's really the way the industry is developed and how both sizes have changed. So just in summary, I absolutely support helping him out and doing something about it, because I don't think it's unique. But are there other options, and how would we go about moving this forward? Thanks.
So yeah, good question, Jim. Obviously, I think obviously to everyone on the call today, this isn't something that we anticipated doing in 2025, right? So we have an approved 2025 work plan, moving forward with action on those deliverables. But again, this may be something that, as you indicated, something relatively minor if we don't address it the way that he's suggesting we address it. And it may be that we continue to have conversations about it over the year, and then maybe as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll have a better idea of which way we may want to go with it, at which point we put it on our 2026 implementation plan.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Again, I'll maybe some discussions with the feds too about are there other avenues, and we'll follow up on it. But that sounds great. Thanks a lot. Oh, by the way, my son works for the Parks Department in the state, and they're having a 100th anniversary, so they're getting the Air Force to do flyovers of the park. So maybe you can get Dover Air Force to do some tanker overflies over your office for the anniversary.
Excellent idea. Excellent.
All right. So yeah, thanks for that, Jim. Chris, I just had one comment regarding the upcoming work that Julia is going to be taking. I don't even know if I want to call it work, but just the updates on wind. Wind has gotten in the Mid Atlantic. It's the level of interest has risen over the last few years, and with the U.S. wind project, that's offshore, kind of Delaware, Maryland. It's driven even more concern in the area now with the administration changing and some of the executive orders that have been coming out of that. There are just a lot of questions as to what's going to continue, what things may stop, where do certain processes kind of start and stop. So any kind of update that Julia might have in a few months, I'm sure would be helpful for those of us who are involved in the wind work, and trying to figure out what will continue and what won't under the new orders from the president. So, but thanks for at least for recognizing that and realizing its significance, and hopefully we can get that on the April agenda.
Right. I think to that point, I don't really spend a lot of time with what Julia puts in the briefing book, and that's probably a disservice to some extent. But I don't think I need to read through all the stuff that's in there to give the council an idea of what we're actually tracking. Right? There's a lot, and certainly we're in uncertain times as it relates to wind. If you look at a number of those projects, there's construction underway. There's turbines going up.
Yep.
And expect that those turbines will continue to go up, that no one's going to stop that from happening. But I would expect that the money that was flowing to, some newer wind projects or approval of newer wind projects, maybe some of that's going to change. But again, we don't know. And Julia will continue to be the Mid-Atlantic Council staffer that's involved with wind, continue to be involved with the New England Council with these comment letters, and continue to put together, documents for our website, which is excellent and details a lot of the wind stuff that, if folks have questions about wind from, stakeholders, the folks that are in their states, want more information, direct them to that wind page. That's another excellent resource that they should take a look at. So, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Does anyone from the audience have any questions for Chris?
Yeah. Rich Wong.
Rich, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Chris, and to your staff for getting this meeting, running this meeting, even though we got more than a half a foot of snow here in Dover. Appreciate that. I had a quick question. It might belong in other business, but since Chris is on a roll here, I want to ask you this. We received an email from NOAA Council Appointments asking to test a digital platform for processing our council nominees.
Mm-hmm.
Could you provide some more information about this pilot test if you have that available? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Rich, that's news to me. That's not something, we Mid-Atlantic Council staff office is not directly involved in that stuff. So I can direct you to someone in DC that might be able to help you with that and certainly answer any questions. But I had no idea that was happening.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Rich, if it helps. So at our last, it was either at our last CCC meeting or the one before that. I was asked, and I don't remember all the details of the individual that approached me, but so I was asked to help participate in a review of the online digital platform that you're referencing. So if you're asking if it's like a scam or something, it's not a scam. It's a real thing. We haven't. We in Maryland haven't taken advantage of. We didn't use it this year through our process, but it doesn't mean that we can't. We don't plan to explore it a little bit. So we'll take a look at it, Rich. And if you have any questions, maybe offline, you can give me a shout, and we can, because I work through that type of stuff through here from in Maryland. So maybe we can talk about it offline.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We also elected not to use it this process because we were already midstream, and it seemed like we only have a handful of nominees. It seems almost unnecessary to get through this digital process. But thank you. Guys.
That's okay. I've got a couple other administrative folks hands up. I'm going to go to Joe Semino and then Chris, I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks. It's on that same issue. It's just, yeah, I mean, our concern with that system, like, and not knowing it is that, we all have to turn these packages over to the governor's office. Our governor's office has always handled it from there. We've always been very happy that they get things in on time. We give them a month pretty much. But then, it's kind of, we don't know what's going to happen from there. So, if this is a system we need to use, it's like something that there's an extra step to a process that's way above our head. And so the more we understand about it, the better.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. All right, Chris.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, use my iPad. Yeah, on that same note, we're not using the system. Like Joe said, it appears that it's skipping some important steps, like our department leadership, most importantly, the governor's office. I'd like to try it out maybe after this this cycle's over. I've been trying to log on every time I do. Either my password doesn't work or the server's down. Go figure. But I hope they come up with a better system, because the fillable PDF that they have for council nominees was particularly buggy this year. But yeah, just kind of adding to some of the experiences that we've had to help Rick out. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Chris. Joe Grist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm just going to echo the same thing. By the time they announced that, we are already halfway through our process, because I have the same issue as Joe Semino does, needing to work it through our governor's office. By the time they released it to us, it was almost like a joke. I thought it was a scam at first. But also something that Chris Fassever just said, and I'm curious if everyone else had the same situation. The forms this year that we did get early on did seem buggy. We've had a lot of problems getting electronic signatures this year. I had a couple submissions where they couldn't get the signature done at all. We had to go back and try and get wet signatures. And so it sounds like I'm not the only one that had that issue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we can, we're in the same boat here. We got the email after we already submitted all of our documentation to the governor's office. So maybe over the course of the next year, we can work out some of the kinks with the new system and have something in place for next year that could work better for all of us. All right. I don't see any other hands. Let me ask one last time. Is there anyone from the public, from the audience, that would like to ask a question or has any comments related to Chris's report? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and move on. Thanks for your report, Chris.
A couple of things, Mr. Chair, before we move on very quickly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so on the last topic, one of the things that some of the folks have asked me about is a replacement for Dan Farnham. So Dan resigned. Right. Yeah, Dan resigned, and he was occupying or in a at-large seat for the state of New York. And the process, as far as I know, has started. That we've notified NIFS. Mike Petney has worked with folks in headquarters relative to getting that process started. I'm not sure if any letters have gone out to the governors of the various states, but because it's an at-large seat, the request would go to each one of the governors asking for any nominations for that particular seat. The individual that replaces Dan would serve in that seat until August of 26, which is the term that Dan had. Right. And then he would be done. He or she would be done and would have to start another term. In fact, they were interested in doing that. So you can think of someone like Dewey, who, basically occupied a seat in New York for a couple of years and then was reappointed 3 more times for a total of 11 years on the council. So anyway, we'll see how that plays out. I'm not sure again where we're at in the process, but just know that in fact, things are happening in the background. The other thing relates to something that Rich Wong brought up relative to snow. So we lucked out. Timing's everything as it relates to our meetings. certainly the decision that we made a couple of years ago, or last, I guess it was a couple of years ago now, to have a virtual February meeting worked out well this year. We have a virtual February meeting scheduled for next year as well. However, my point is this: if in fact we decide at any point that we don't like virtual meetings anymore, or we want to meet in person in February, we can change that. Just recognize that there has to be some time so that we can make that happen. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Thank you for wrapping up your report, Chris. I don't see any hands. So I think it's probably safe that we can move on. Thanks again. Let's see. All right, it's 9:40. We'll just go ahead and keep plugging ahead. If folks need to take a break, I can't stop them. But we're going to jump into organization reports, and we'll go ahead and get started with NOAA Fisheries Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office and Mike Pentney, if you're with us.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. Just
right.
a couple of updates. Actually, first, to respond to Chris Betsavish's question about the gear marking framework adjustment. As Chris noted, the first framework meeting will be in the April council meetings for both councils. We are also planning to present in front of the lobster board at the May meeting. So in addition to commission staff participating in the PDT FMAT, we'll have staff that'll present at that lobster board meeting in May. I guess somewhat related, we published on December 18th, we published a final rule in the Federal Register for Framework 15 to monkfish and Framework 6 to spiny dogfish. This action was the recommendation of both New England Fishery Management Councils to reduce bycatch of Atlantic sturgeon in those fisheries, in the gillnet fisheries. And so those, just as a reminder, the framework included area-based requirements for monkfish vessels to use low-profile gillnet gear. That goes into effect January 1st, 2026. So about 10 and a half months from now. And then seasonal area-based prohibitions on overnight soaks apply to dogfish vessels in certain areas, and that will begin May 1st of 2025. A couple of herring actions of note. On December 19th, we published an interim final rule reducing the 2025 herring specs. That was at the request of the New England Council to lessen the risk of overfishing and help rebuild the herring stock. We originally set the 2025 herring specifications in early 2023 as part of multi-year specifications. But after reviewing the results of the 2024 stock assessment, the New England Council recommended reduced specifications for 2025 through 2027. We were concerned that implementing the new specifications after the start of the fishing year would, significantly increase the risk that initial catch right after the start could exceed the new lower catch limits. So we did that as an interim final rule to make sure that they were in place on January 1st. So that temporary rule will expire unless it's changed on December 31st of 2025. As of February 6th, 100% of the herring management area 3 sub-ACL was harvested. And just a note, under the provisions of the FMP, if final fishery data indicate that the total catch exceeded the area 3 sub-ACL, then the amount of the overage will be deducted from the area 3 sub-ACL in fishing year 2026, barring any other changes. And that's all I have for today, Mr. Vice Chair.
All right, thanks, Mike. Any questions, comments from Mike? Anyone from the audience? All right, I do have one hand. Greg DiDomenico. Go ahead, Greg.
Good morning, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
I just have a quick request to the RA. Mike, can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Excellent. Is it possible the agency could come up with a bulletin, maybe like you guys do with some other final rules, regarding the changes in the confidentiality requirements. I think that was finalized in December.
Yeah, we could look into that. I think, as you know, the confidentiality rule came out of our headquarters offices. It's a national rule. And obviously the people that put together our normal fishery bulletins are the regional office staff. So I can talk with them and see what we can do, see if there's some sort of messaging that we could get out, and we could put that in the form that our industry is familiar with, and try to get that out through our own distribution channels.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Mike. Any other questions or comments? All right, I don't see any hands. Mike, thank you for your report. We're going to go next to the Science Center. Dr. John Hare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I assume you can hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Okay,
It's all
great,
you.
thank you. So just going through a couple of items. Dr. Ford gave a thorough update on Science Center survey activities, so I will not repeat that here. The 2025 Northeast Cooperative Research Summit was held in January 28th in Portland, Maine, with participation across the Northeast region, so including both Mid-Atlantic and New England Council regions. It was a very successful event. I attended the morning. Very exciting, a lot of energy, a lot of interest in cooperative research. The Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel, Hannah already gave an update on that. In terms of the observer updates, I just want to thank, the captains and crews and observers and observer programs and Office of Law Enforcement in the U.S. Coast Guard. There were two serious at-sea emergencies involving observers over the past month. They ended well because of the involvement and help of everyone. So I just wanted to say thank you and acknowledge particularly U.S. Coast Guard and Office of Law Enforcement for their involvement in having those at-sea emergencies end well. In terms of assessments, Dr. Moore presented sort of what's expected coming up during his report, and just to provide a little more information, we are going to start management track community input meetings as a way to sort of gather information to potentially include in our management track assessments. That first input meeting is going to be held on February 26th, and it will be to provide input for the June 2026 management tracks. And there'll be more information coming out soon about how those input meetings are going to work. The assessment oversight panel will meet on February 27th to recommend the level of peer review for the June 2025 management tracks assessments, and many of those assessments are Mid-Atlantic Council managed species. There will be an Atlantic herring peer review meeting for the Atlantic herring research track held March 10th to March 14th. And then the Atlantic Scallop research track working group is continuing with a peer review expected in April 21st. In terms of protected species, just one note or two notes really. There was a large aggregation of right whales observed in the Jeffreys Ledge and Jeffrey Basin area in the Gulf of Maine. The state of Maine, the state of Massachusetts, the state of New Hampshire all worked very hard to communicate that information so that their fishermen were aware and could try to do what they could to avoid interactions with that large group of whales. It was more than 50 individuals. And then the second piece is the winter calving season off of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida continues. To date, there have been 10 calves spotted, and significantly, one calf was first observed off the coast of New Jersey. It's not clear whether that calf was born north of Cape Hatteras and seen in the aerial surveys or born in the traditional calving grounds and then making its way north with the mother already. But 10 right whale calves is it's turning into a decent year of calf production. There was, some comments around offshore wind. Science Center continues to work on its survey mitigation program and continues to support the regional office in their work with offshore wind. In terms of our ecosystem-based approaches to fisheries management, we held a workshop for development of the state of the ecosystem reports, and those will be presented to the council later in 2025. And we heard already at this meeting about the Loch Ness project. And Mr. Kalin mentioned yesterday that the ICES preliminary report for the workshop it was an ICES workshop organized in part by NOAA Fisheries. And that report is available. And I can send that to Dr. Moore so he can distribute it to the council to see what that workshop came up with. So that's my report, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, John. Any questions? All right. I don't see any hands from members of the council. Anyone from the public? Any questions for John? All right. Oh, I saw a couple hands go up. I'll start again with you, Greg, and then we'll go to James Fletcher. Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks, Mike. Dr. Hare, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Would there be any way the Science Center could perform some assessment of fluke just to determine if we are still overfishing?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure where it is on the management track schedule, but it would be hard for us to do something that we haven't already been planning to do. So I will check the management track assessment schedule and sort of respond to Dr. Moore.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Hannah can help with that too. Hannah.
Yeah, Fluke is scheduled for a management track assessment for this year. It'll be one of those June assessments. So we'll actually get a management track for summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass.
Great. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. James Fletcher.
Dr. Ford came up with some information regarding electric fishing in Europe. Is there any way the center would consider a new survey of electric fishing to get us some decent science on the surveys? It's frustrating that we have best available science, and when something new, it takes 50 years for it to become. Is there any chance that the Science Center would go to an aluminum hull and electronic fishing for a survey system? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Fletcher. I mean, we've talked about this at prior council meetings, and you had put us in touch with a company that could advise on that. But when they sort of learned more about the topic, they were no longer interested in sort of continuing those discussions. So at this point in time, we are focused on the surveys that we're currently doing, and then the surveys that we've identified that could be started in response to offshore wind. In terms of an aluminum hulled vessel, we would need to talk with Office of Marine and Aircraft Operations about whether that would be something they would be interested in. So it's possible, but I think to start a new survey using a new vessel, using a new gear type at this point in time is unlikely.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm just looking to see if there are any other hands. I don't see any. Okay. Thanks. Thank you again for your report, John.
Thank
we're
you.
we're gonna go to the other John, NOAA's Office of General Counsel, John Almeida.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, you sound good.
Okay, thanks. I only have a few cases to report on in this report. The first one is the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association case. You may remember this one. The plaintiff in this case is challenging the New England Council's Groundfish Framework 65 in the District Court for the District of Maine. And this is one of the appointments clause cases where the argument is that the council system violates the U.S. Constitution's appointments clause. We had a challenge, a very similar challenge to a Mid-Atlantic action on, raising similar arguments about the council system and the appointments clause, and that was the Lofstad case. Since our last meeting in the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association case, the court issued a decision on the parties' cross motions for summary judgment, and that ruling came on December 30th. And the ruling in Maine was very similar to the decision that came out of the Third Circuit in Lofstad. Like Lofstad, the District of Maine found that two provisions of the Magnuson-Stevens Act that would provide councils with the ability to prevent the Secretary of Commerce from acting without council approval, those two provisions would run afoul of the appointments clause, and that's similar to what happened in Lofstad. And what the court did in Maine was similar to what the Third Circuit did. Basically, the court severed these two provisions from the statute, and by doing so, found that the councils no longer had significant authority that would raise appointments clause concerns. The provisions that the court found problematic were 304C3, and that's the section that would require council approval for the secretary to pursue limited access programs, and 304H, which would require a three-fourth vote by the council to approve before the secretary could repeal or revoke an FMP. So what the court did was it basically wrote those provisions out of the statute, and by doing so found that the appointments clause was not a concern any longer. Like I said, that decision came out at the end of 2024. The deadline for seeking further review in the First Circuit is the end of February, and as of now, no one has filed a notice of appeal. And the other case I'm going to report on, this is a right whale case, and this is Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association in the District of Massachusetts. You may recall that this case was filed to challenge an MMPA rulemaking that would close a wedge area between the already existing seasonal closure areas in state and federal waters off the coast of Massachusetts. The case moved very quickly in the district court, and the court issued a ruling on the merits on March 15th of 2024, finding that the wedge rule violated the provisions of the 2023 Consolidated Appropriations Act and therefore was void and unenforceable until the end of 2028. NIMS appealed that decision to the First Circuit, and on January 30th, the First Circuit issued a decision reversing the district court, finding that the wedge rule fell within an exception to the regulatory pause created by the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and that NIMS did have the authority to promulgate that rule. The parties have until, I believe it's March 17th, to seek additional review from the First Circuit. No one has filed anything yet. And that's all I have for my report this time. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, John. Let me look to see if anybody from the council has any questions for John. I did see a hand. Peter Hughes. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, John. Thanks for that. I'm going to ask this question again. Do we, in regards to the pocket veto and the court's ruling, do we go to the courts to amend Magnuson Act, or is it through Congress? Because it's kind of a mixed signal that we're receiving.
Well, yeah, if you wanted to amend the Magnuson Act, you would go to Congress and Congress would rewrite the statute. What the court did was it interpreted Magnuson and said basically, to the extent that Magnuson purports to say this, that would violate the Constitution. So we're going to read it as it doesn't say that because we can't have a statute that violates the Constitution. So it's kind of I don't know if you could say almost like an interpretation that leads you to a rewriting of the statute without literally rewriting the statute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then doesn't that push up against Chevron? I mean, it's just weird, and I'll put my hand down and leave it at that. Thank you, John.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Sorry.
All right. I don't see any other hands. Is there anyone from the audience has any hands? Okay. No hands on the screen at this time. John, thank you for your report this morning and for your training yesterday regarding the issues that you went through with the council. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to, we have two more organization reports. I'm going to go next to NOAA's Office of Law Enforcement. I think I saw Caleb's name here. Caleb, are you with us today?
Yes. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I got you. Yep, go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning, council members. I'm going to be extremely brief today as I have nothing significant to report from the Office of Law Enforcement since the December meeting. I'll look forward to providing the council with a comprehensive oral, hopefully written report at the April meeting in the fashion the council is accustomed to receiving from the Office of Law Enforcement. But that's all I have for the council today.
Yeah, no trouble, Caleb. Maybe you can hang with us for a second to see if anybody has any questions or has anything they want to bring up. Any members of the council, members of the public, anything they want to ask the Office of Law Enforcement? I don't see any hands, Caleb. All right, so thanks for your report. We'll look forward to your next report at our next meeting in April.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. All right, jumping to our last report, U.S. Coast Guard report. We have Lieutenant Commander Josh Moan with us. Josh?
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning,
Good morning.
everybody. The Coast Guard has done some good work over the last couple months since our last meeting, covering December and January. We conducted a total of 67 fisheries boardings and issued 2 fisheries violations. The 10th of December, the cutter Angela McShann issued an enforcement action report on a commercial fishing vessel for undersized net mesh. And on the 25th of January, the Roland Fritsch issued an enforcement action report on a commercial fishing vessel for undersized net mesh and for possession of some undersized scup. We've been doing several marine protected species support during this time. So Station Hatteras Inlet were able to deploy approximately 115 sea turtles. Cutter Nathaniel Bruckenthal was able to deploy 46 sea turtles. Station Hatteras Inlet did another 50 sea turtles on the 3rd of January. On the 10th of January, the cutter Richard Snyder was able to deploy 39 sea turtles. And on the 17th of January, Station Hatteras Inlet was able to deploy 25 sea turtles. These sea turtles were cold stunned from further north, and they were dropped off with a local wildlife rescue organization, Nest, given to the Coast Guard to put them back into the Gulf Stream and hopefully have them continue surviving. For continued operations, there were no changes from my last report. We're still conducting op stars and stripers, targeting fishing vessels for targeting vessels who are fishing for Atlantic striped bass in federal waters. Op right speed, focusing on ensuring vessels 65 feet or larger are complying with the seasonal management area speed restriction zones, as well as op fin finder just wrapped up. Those where we were targeting vessels fishing for Atlantic bluefin tuna off of North Carolina. During this period, we've conducted 61 dockside examinations for a total of 129 fiscal year to date. We issued 46 decals and had 3 commercial fishing vessel terminations. So on the 10th of December, Sector Virginia received notification that the Coast Cutter Pompano boarding team had discovered 3 safety violations on the fishing vessel Tanya Maria and requested to terminate the voyage. The vessel had no commercial fishing vessel safety decal, no immersion suits on board, and no survival craft. The termination was approved. On the 18th of December, Sector Maryland National Capital Region received notification that from the Coast Guard Cutter Roland Fritch boarding team that they discovered especially hazardous conditions on board, as they had a leaking shaft seal on the fishing vessel integrity, as well as 3 other safety violations. The violations that they had an expired hydrostatic release for the survival craft, not having sufficient length of line for a life ring, and no drills or instructions were performed or documented. That termination was approved as well. And on the 31st of January, the Coast Guard Cutter Pompano boarding team discovered 4 safety violations on the fishing vessel Miss Behaven and requested to terminate the voyage. That vessel had no commercial fishing vessel safety decal, no immersion suits, no survival craft, and no visual distress signals. That termination was also approved. The Coast Guard continues to do commercial fishing vessel information and education. So District 5 and Sector Virginia conducted outreach to over 11,000 members of the boating public and commercial fishing vessel industry personnel at the 72nd Annual Mid-Atlantic Sports and Boat Show in Virginia Beach. Sector Virginia D5 and Sector Maryland National Capital Region did outreach to over 2,000 industry personnel at the 50th East Coast Commercial Fishermen's Expo in Ocean City. And then we continue to do dock walks training and education and commercial fishing vessel safety training for our crews. Pending any questions, that is it for the Coast Guard.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Any questions? Okay, anyone from the public? Any hands? Questions for Josh or the Coast Guard? Greg DiDomenico.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, Josh. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine, sir.
Sorry about not using your rank. Sorry to be a little bit familiar, but
that's okay.
Anyway, the vessels and the trips that were terminated in North Carolina, what were those vessels fishing for?
There were no vessel terminations in North Carolina. Sector Virginia, the vessel were fishing for oysters inside Chesapeake Bay, both the Tanya Maria and the Misbehaven, and then Maryland fishing vessel integrity. I'd have to verify what exactly they were fishing for.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other members of the council or the public? Questions for Lieutenant Commander Moan? Okay, seeing none. Josh, thank you for your report, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, we'll go ahead and try to wrap things up here with our liaison reports. We have a New England Council report, so I'm going to turn things over to Peter Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again, Council. This is my liaison report from the January 28th through 30th New England Fisheries Management Council meeting that was held in Portsmouth. Similar to this meeting, we received a number of updates also from the Science Center, but they did take some action on a few items. The Habitat Committee report, the council moved to commence development of an EHF designation alternatives for skate, monkfish, herring, and cod during 2025 with ongoing council actions or via an EFH framework as appropriate. I'm sure that this is just the beginning of this action, and I'm sure that it will be shared with the Mid-Atlantic Council as it continues to develop, because we're both partners on the monkfish fishery management plan. The council took action to update their operations handbook as we have done in the past ourselves. The Groundfish Committee report, they took action to address recreational management measures. They moved that they took measures to address the Western Gulf of Maine cod fishery, the Gulf of Maine haddock fishery, and the council also moved to recommend to GARFO that the recreational measures for Western Gulf of Maine cod should also be applied to the Eastern Gulf of Maine cod and Georges Banks cod. The Atlantic Herring Committee report, in regards to specifications, they moved to request the SSC provide an updated fishing year 2025 and 2026 OFL and ABC recommendations based on new information. The preliminary 2024 catch estimate prepared by the plan development team, the results of the peer review of a research track assessment in March, and risk analysis prepared by the PDT. In regards to the Scout Committee, the New England Fishery Management Council will be hosting 3 visioning workshops in February and March to address pressing long-term issues for the scallop fishery, facilitated by council staff, committee chair, and advisors. The meetings will take place February 27th at the Maine Fishery Forum, March 4th in New Bedford, and March 13th in Philadelphia. If anybody can participate in those, it would be greatly appreciated because it is a long-term visioning project. And that, Mr. Chair, concludes my report.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Are there any questions or comments for Peter from anyone on the call today? I don't see any hands. Well, we have a one hand, James Fletcher. Go ahead, James.
Peter, will any of those be web accessible or are they all in person? The scallop meetings.
Yeah, in regards to the meeting taking place at the Maine Fishermen's Forum, I don't know that there's going to be web access. But let me double check, Jim, and I'll give you a personal phone call and let you know. And make sure you have that information so you can participate.
I understand.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you for that. Seeing no other hands. Peter, thank you for your New England report. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up with the South Atlantic Council report. I'm going to turn things over to Sunny to get us started off if there's a report for us. Sunny?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I believe Carrie's on here, and I believe she's going to give the report. Carrie, you on here?
Yes. Hey, can y'all hear me?
Thank you.
Yep. Go
Hey.
ahead, Carrie. Sorry.
Hey. No worries. No worries. I wasn't sure who was going to do it, but I'm happy to do it. Let's see. I'm not sure if y'all are aware that red snapper, our problematic species, is now under the purview of a secretarial amendment. We got an update about that at our December meeting where we met in North Carolina. Since sort of the liaison report has come out, I can tell you that the actions in the secretarial amendment have been released. They do include there was an updated stock assessment, which the council has not seen. We will see more about that in March. But that has sort of made it possible for there to be a slight increase in the ABC for red snapper. New proposals will include more fishing days for the recreational sector, also a higher trip limit, slightly higher trip limit for the commercial sector, and a closed area off of Florida for all snapper grouper fishing for 3 months of the year in order to decrease recreational dead discards, which have been an issue with red snapper. So that is out now to the public. NIMS, obviously, because it's a secretarial amendment, is doing the public meetings. There's been one already up in North Carolina and Morehead City, one in Charleston, and then there will be a couple more in Georgia and Florida, culminating, I think, with the last one being at our March council meeting. It is my understanding that the plan, this is a result, if you recall, I'm not sure, of a settlement of a lawsuit with some commercial fishermen. And my understanding is that part of that settlement means this needs to be in place by sometime in June. I forget the exact date. So that's fun for red snapper. At our December meeting, we also did some work on the Southeast for Hire integrated electronic reporting, or what we call CFIRE, our for hire logbook. We are considering some changes to those regulations in order to make that logbook more effective. We did hear a presentation at our last meeting about the electronic vessel trip reports that you all use in the Mid-Atlantic, and that was helpful. Right now, council staff is working on some draft actions and alternatives to see what we want to do as far as improving reporting for that program. And I'm just trying to hit the highlights. I can certainly answer any questions after. We're working on Black Sea Bass Amendment 56, which is an assessment response. The latest assessment showed that our Black Sea Bass, unlike yours, is not doing very well. And the assessment indicates that the population is depleted. So we're waiting on some updated projections to develop in the SSC to develop ABC recommendations. We have not looked at management measures for that yet. We're also continuing to do work on our private recreational permit and education requirements, which we call Amendment 46. We're still in sort of the phase of trying to figure out how much is going to be just having a recreational permit and for which species, and do we want a reporting requirement? There's been lots of discussion about whether the states would house this permit or the feds would, and we're still working through that. So that will be ongoing for a while. We got the results from a golden tilefish stock assessment presented by Southeast Fisheries Science Center. And the good news is that stock is not overfished nor experiencing overfishing. The South Atlantic Council also has a commercial snapper grouper subcommittee that has met once, that is meeting again in March, where we are beginning to discuss sort of any changes that might need to be made to the commercial fishery, including whether or not we continue on with our 2-for-1. I'm sure you're familiar, but in case you're not, you have to buy 2 commercial snapper grouper unlimited permits and retire 1 in order to enter the fishery. So that subcommittee will continue to meet until it will finally take recommendations to the full committee, and we'll discuss any changes that need to be made to the commercial snapper grouper regulations. And those are sort of the highlights. Again, happy to answer any questions. And Sunny, if I missed anything you think will be important to this group, please feel free to add it. Thanks.
Yeah, Carrie, thank you very much for your report. I'll ask Sunny if there's anything he wants to add before we go to the council for questions. Sunny, anything that you want to add from Carrie's report?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Just that one of the things they've been working on, and that'll be coming up in this March meeting, is the Spanish mackerel port meetings they've been having, and we'll get an update on that in March, what is kind of interest of the Mid-Atlantic. But other than that, great report. Thank you, Carrie.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Sunny. Any questions for Carrie or Sunny? Anyone from the public? I don't see any hands. So you guys are off the hook. Thank you again for the South Atlantic report. That brings us to our last item on the agenda for today, which is other business and or general public comments. Is there any new business to come before the council, or does anyone from the audience have anything they want to bring up with the council before we adjourn? Okay, seeing no hands. Thank you all for your attention over the last day and a half. If you can all keep Wes's mom in your thoughts, hopefully everything is going to be okay with her. And Peter, if I may end up seeing you on Broad Street on Friday, we'll see how the weather looks, but I may bump into you or one of the other 100-something thousand crazy people in the city of Philadelphia on Friday. So we'll see.
There's going to be 1 million, and I'll send you where we're going to be. We're going to home base.
Excellent. Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, everybody. That concludes our business to come before the council for this virtual February meeting. And I want to thank everybody for all your participation and efforts over the last day and a half. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we will see all of you in New Jersey in April.